Today I want to highlight for you the differences between Jane Austen and Emily Bronte. In high school, everybody, a majority of students preferred PE or their chosen elective, but I was a small population that chose English. I was able to whether do essays or English assignments. And throughout that, I gained my knowledge and interest for the literature authors of Miss Jane Austen and Miss Emily Bronte. Many critics and professors compare the works of Bronte and Austen, but they never really talked about the big differences between them and their works. These opinions are really talked about within academics and professors. So I want to highlight the differences between the praised novelist Jane Austen and Emily Bronte and the works such as Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights. Firstly, I'd like to discuss about the life of Jane Austen and how her life reflected within those novels. Compared to other writers, Jane Austen had a normal upbringing, so she based realism in her work, such like Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. However, since she had began writing her works, she started to develop her own sense of style, which was not common within her era. And her style was consistent throughout her rest of her works, and within the style you see that she based most of her works on realism, reality of the time period she was living in, and also she put in a form of her own wit and style that was not common for most authors within her period. Let me cite you an expert from within the authors of the biography of Jane Austen that describes a bit of her work. Using that frame, she revealed her wit and dislike of the sensibility or romantic hysteria, a distinct perspective that would eventually characterize her much of her later writing. Jane often fills her novel with ordinary people, places, and events in stark contrast to the other novels of the time, wrote Catherine Sutherland in her article Jane Austen, Social Realism and the Novel. Following her publication of her novel, Jane Austen was praised for being one of the greatest writers by both academics and the public. Jane Austen started to get praised in the early 20th century. That was after her death by the public for her different views of society and her take on reality. Austen's achievement depended on her strong intelligence, which we saw early on in her early works, and on her strong instinct for the rhythms of her story formation, said a loyal public critic of Austen, Tessa Hadley, writer of the article What Matters in Jane Austen. However, to those praises also surfaced critique from the academics that viewed the work of Jane Austen as hardly innovative for the English literature. Many writers talked about the role Jane Austen pioneered and debated the interest many have held within her works. As an expert, what is all this about Jane Austen? Said Joseph Conrad, H.G. Wells. What is there in her? What's it all about? And Ramir Novak said, I just like Jane. I could never see that much intelligence in Pride and Prejudice. But due to the fact of the critics' review, Jane Austen did not let reviews change her lifestyle within her novels. She continued to write her novels as she saw fit. By the time she began writing Emma, Austen was no longer responding to other novels. She was in a new territory in a dialogue within her own earlier novels. She has been steeped in the fiction of the early 18th and 19th century, and in her earliest work, she wrote against the novels of sensibility or the Gothic fiction that she knew so well. And then, in contrast, Emily Bronte had a different lifestyle than Jane Austen, yet she was put in the same praises as Jane Austen, since most would put them in the same category since they were both English female writers. However, she did not like this since she wanted to be different in a different spectrum than Jane Austen. In difference from Austen, who stuck to reality and realism, Bronte had a strong imagination and stuck to fiction rather than non-fiction. Some of her works offer her insights of her imagination, which was different from that era since most stuck to romanticizing reality. Emily was a child of the Romantic movement, but both Gothic, expressed Robert McCrum, writer of the article last 100 novels. However, in the beginning of her career, Emily and her sister wrote under the male alias Ellis Bells. She believed that would expose her novels to a more broader audience. After her death, her only published work, Wuthering Heights, was brought out her real identity. Many saw that as a breakthrough for Bronte, such as, for example, Wuthering Heights is called intime, intense, fierce, inward, solid, elusive, and unknowable. After her death, Wuthering Heights is considered a celebrated literary novel, said McCrum in his article. Concentrating on her work after her death, Bronte's novel was considered more famed rather than Austen's novels. At first, with Wuthering Heights, they did not know what to do with it, but after her death, the mixed reviews went and the praises came. Emily took the bigger creative risk rather than her sisters and rather than Jane Austen. Emily Bronte's works were more concentrated in Gothic literature, and her imagination was way ahead of her time. Bronte's one-swept masterpiece is notable for not just for its wild beauty, but for its daring reinnovation of the novel form itself. In conclusion, many would seem to compare Jane Austen and Emily Bronte since they were both 19th century female English authors. However, from the point considered of reading both of their works from some time, I analyzed the contrast rather than comparisons of both authors.
Francesca, what did you think?
I said that I got a little bit confused with how you started because I thought you started with the thesis, but I guess like that was your attention device, but I was able to like catch on like where your thesis was towards the end. And so with that, I feel like you need a little bit like more structure for your speech. I also like how you referenced that you took a class about like these authors and like you've read like all these books, like, which I think is like good to show that you're really credible to give the speech. I like how you talked about each author and how it was like clear which author you were talking about, because you said like in contrast I'm going to talk about this author compared to like the first one. Okay, so I wish you would have explained, I guess, like more of what you thought of them and what their differences were, instead of like just listing all these quotes from other people, like telling like what they thought, like because like I know you took the class, so I feel like you would have some more insight as to like, or your opinion as to like what their differences are. And also, I wish you also could have talked about like their books. Like I know you talked about like reviews about their books, but I wish you talked about like or to summarize like what the book was about and why it was different, because I saw that you still had like 2 minutes left, so you could have talked about like one book for like a minute, and then another book for like another minute, and also that you didn't have a visual, so maybe next time that would have been great. But overall, it was pretty interesting.
All right. I yelled at a whole bunch of people in my last class for doing the same thing, so I'm going to warn everybody now. If you're starting with a phrase that says, today I want to talk about or highlight for you, or today I'm going to explain, or my subject today, or I'm going to present an informative speech on, I'm deducting points from you immediately. I told you to start with an attention device. You've got a good attention device. It should be the start of your speech. You know, when everybody else was taking a PE class or doing something else, I signed up for this other class, and I found it really interesting, and that's what I want to share with you today. I want to talk about this particular issue. So you just got it backwards, all right? That's an easy fix, all right? So let's not make that mistake again, I'm saying it now. Those of you who have made that mistake before you get up to speak, fix it before you do it again, because I get less and less tolerant of people ignoring me. The more and more I say the same thing over and over again. I'm sorry if that sounds irritable, but you know, you poke a bear enough with a sharp stick, he gets irritable. The thesis statement I thought was fine. I was kind of wondering why it is that they don't compare them. It seems like at the very beginning of the speech you're saying they don't really compare these two, and I'm going, okay, well, why wouldn't you compare the two? It seems like it's a natural comparison because they are both women writers of the same time period. They worked in not exactly the same genre, but not completely dissimilar genres, and it seems like it would be a natural for comparison. You make it sound like you're going to be the first person ever who did this. I can't believe that's the case. I mean, somebody out there has got to have written about these sorts of things. But I kind of understand the justification that you're giving for the presentation, so I can see that. I just think it needs a little bit more explanation. I didn't really get much of a preview, but I do know that it's organized into two parts. First, we're going to be talking about Jane Austen, and then we're talking about Emily Bronte, and that's fine. You're going to do a contrast. That's good. You do a nice job citing information on the first point, especially. There's a lot of criticism, a lot of people who've written about this that you're quoting. One of the things that's a little bit problematic, and I didn't explain this to people before because I wasn't really expecting it to be an issue, but whenever you cite information after you've presented it, that's very confusing. Because then we don't know, well, which part of this was your analysis and which part was the person that you're quoting. I don't know. But if you say, here's what I think is the case, and Suzanne Smith said in her book, blah, 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 that this is the case, then I know whatever follows the citation is the quoted material. As it was, I got a lot of stuff that's being said here, and sometimes it sounds like it's a completely different voice than you, but sometimes it sounds like it's you talking, and I'm going, okay, well, what am I getting here? Is this you, or is this one of the sources that you're citing? And I thought that was problematic in a number of spots, especially in the first section on Jane Austen. I know what Francesca's talking about. I wouldn't say that you've got a minute for each of those books to compare, but you're describing what the difference is, their voice is, how Jane Austen's dealing with realism, and how Emily Bronte's voice is different. And I'm going, have you got a paragraph that you could read from each of these books that would give me some sense of what it is you're talking about? Because I don't know. I don't have the book in front of me. I can't look at it. And that's something that's missing. And that, for example, could be something that you could do on a visual. You could say, look at the difference in the language that's here. Here's a typical passage from one of Jane Austen's works, and you can see her use of metaphor, or you can see the realism that's going on there, or you can see how the sentences are structured, or whatever it is that you think is distinctive about her, and maybe the contrast to the time period. And then here's Emily Bronte and her key pivotal work, and look how different it is, the way things are described, or notice how the sentence runs on. I don't know. I mean, I'm just making stuff up here, but you're the one who's saying that they are different, that they, some comparison's appropriate, but I don't get much of the comparison that's going on here, and I think that that's a problem. And of course, Francesca mentioned at the very end one of the biggest problems, since 25% of your grade is based on your use of visual or supplementary materials, and there is none. That's going to be an issue for you, because you basically don't have anything. And there are things that, if you had asked me, I'd have talked to you about some ideas on this kind of stuff. I just mentioned one of them. I'm sure that you could do a timeline, for instance, where you do the comparison. It sounds like Emily Bronte wrote several works that were not attributed to her in her lifetime, and only Wuthering Heights was finally attributed to her at the end, although she has other works that are important, but they were under a pseudonym. That would have been something that maybe you could have done a list on or an explanation, and we could see the similarities in styles there. Something, but you don't have anything here. The problem is that this sounds like an essay for an English class that you're reading out loud and or giving a speech from, and it doesn't sound much like a speech, and it lacks some of the characteristics that we need to have. All right, thank you.